Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're cracking open a historical cold case, really using ancient texts as our evidence to find what might just be the very first core message of Christianity.
Okay, let's just dive right in. The big question is this. Is it even possible to find a belief that dates back not decades, not even years, but maybe just months after the events it's talking about? We're on the hunt for a direct, unbroken link to the very beginning. So, our first real clue pops up in a letter written around 55 AD by the Apostle Paul. And he starts with this very deliberate phrase, basically telling his audience, hey, listen up. What I'm about to tell you, this isn't my own stuff. I'm just the messenger here, passing along an official tradition that I was given way earlier. So, what exactly is this message that he supposedly received? And why are his specific words so important for our investigation? Let's break it down. Well, the message itself is this really compact 4-line summary. It's a creed, and it says that Christ died for our sins, he was buried, he was raised on the third day, and then, and this is key, he appeared to a specific list of eyewitnesses. This is the core belief that he claims he received. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The language Paul uses here, peridoka and paralabon, isn't just casual. These were, for all intents and purposes, legal, technical terms in ancient Jewish culture. It was like saying, I'm passing on evidence in a chain of custody. He's signaling that this information is a sacred trust, passed down word for word, and he is absolutely forbidden from changing a single thing. Okay, so think about this. If Paul received this formal creed, that means it's got to be even older than his letter from 55 AD, right? The massive question is, how much older? So let's follow the evidence and rewind the clock.
Amazingly, we can build a pretty solid timeline here. We start with his letter around 55 AD. We can then work backwards using other historical anchors, like something called the Gallio inscription, which helps confirm he was in the city of Corinth preaching this exact message around 51 AD. But the real key comes from Paul himself. He tells us that a few years after his conversion, he went to Jerusalem specifically to meet the eyewitnesses Peter and James. That meeting, which we can date to around 35 AD, is the moment historians are pretty sure he formally received this creed. And here's what's so wild about this. The scholarly consensus on this is, well, it's just remarkable. You almost never see this kind of agreement across the board. You have historians from all backgrounds, committed Christians, agnostics like Bart Ehrman, even highly skeptical scholars, and they all agree that this creed was being formulated and recited within just a few years and maybe even a matter of months of the events it describes. So that timeline is incredibly early. I mean, that's almost no time for a legend to develop. But how can we be absolutely sure that Paul didn't just write this himself and then, claim it was older? Well, it turns out the text itself holds the linguistic fingerprints. If you've ever read Paul's other writings, you know his style. He writes in these long, complex, sometimes rambling Greek sentences. But the creed? It's the total opposite. It's short, it's poetic, it has this rhythmic quality. This structure is a dead giveaway for Semitic oral tradition. It's designed to be easily memorized and repeated, which is exactly what you'd need in a culture where most people couldn't read. Bottom line, it just doesn't sound like Paul wrote it. And there's more. We find what scholars call Aramaicisms. You can think of these as, well, linguistic fossils. They're little bits of the Aramaic language, which was the language Jesus and his earliest followers actually spoke in Jerusalem, that are perfectly preserved inside the Greek text. They're a telltale sign of where this creed really came from. Just look at these clues. The creed uses the name Cephas for Peter. That's his Aramaic name, not the Greek one, Petros, which Paul uses everywhere else. It refers to the 12, a formal title used by that first group in Jerusalem. All of these linguistic fingerprints point directly back to an origin in the Aramaic-speaking church in Jerusalem, proving Paul is quoting an earlier source. Okay, let's shift gears now to the witnesses themselves, because this is where it gets really compelling. This isn't just a vague claim. The creed cites its sources by name, almost like a modern legal document. The list is so structured, it's not random. It starts with the key individual witness, Peter. Then it expands to the official group, the 12. And then it includes James, Jesus' own brother, who was famously a skeptic before all this happened. I mean, including a former skeptic is such a powerful detail.
Historians love this because you would never invent a story that makes one of your key leaders look like they originally doubted the whole thing. And then comes the bombshell, an appearance to over 500 people at one time. But the Cree doesn't just leave it at that. It adds this incredible little note, most of whom are still alive. That is a direct challenge to anyone listening. It's basically saying, you don't believe us? Fine, go ask them yourselves. They're still around. It's an open invitation to go and verify the claim. And this all loops right back to Paul's trip to Jerusalem. The Greek word he uses to describe his visit is historisai. Now, that doesn't just mean to visit. It's a specific term that means to investigate by interviewing eyewitnesses. So Paul flat out says he went there to investigate. And who did he spend 15 days interviewing? Peter and James, the exact two people named as the foundational witnesses in the Creed. It all just clicks together. So, let's just step back and put all the pieces together. When we look at the legal language, the super early timeline, the linguistic fingerprints, and the specific named eyewitnesses, what's the verdict? What does it all point to?
Well, what we have are 4 independent lines of evidence that all converge on the same conclusion. 1. Paul used legal language to show he was just a messenger. 2. Historians of all stripes agree the message is shockingly early. 3. The language itself proves it came from Jerusalem. And 4. We can pinpoint the very likely time and place where Paul got it directly from the original eyewitnesses.
The real takeaway here, the reason this is so significant, is that this isn't some story that grew and evolved over decades. It's like a historical snapshot. It's a fossil of what the very first followers believed, captured within just moments of the movement's birth, preserved in a way that's almost unheard of for any event in ancient history.
And that leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. We often just assume that ancient beliefs grow slowly, like myths and legends. But right here, we have the foundational claim of what would become the world's largest religion, crystallized into a formal creed and traceable directly to named eyewitnesses, all within months of the events themselves. How does that single fact challenge the way we think about how this whole thing really began?